So we're going to talk a little bit about the total lunacy that has gone on at the Supreme Court since I last did a show a few weeks ago. Not that this is terribly surprising. I think anybody who's paid attention for any any length of time kind of understands that the Supreme Court is not exactly what most people make it out to be. But it certainly has been, this particular court sort of, lifting the veil on some of that, so to say, right? So we're going to show a tweet here. This is from Sawyer Hockett. In one term, the extremist Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, guts Miranda rights, ends regulations on open carry of guns, allows prayer in schools by employees, and ends federal regulation of greenhouse gases. I do want to give one caveat on, he says guts Miranda rights. There's a little bit of a technicality that kind of matters there. Cops do still have to Mirandize you. That didn't change. What changed is whether or not you can sue a cop for not Mirandizing you, if I understand that correctly. So there is a little bit of a caveat on that one, but all of these things pretty terrible, right? I'm moderate on guns, but all of these things seem pretty absurd and ridiculous, and the precedent that has been set, especially in the Dobbs decision there that overturned Roe v. Wade, could be quite catastrophic. And speaking of that decision in particular, Elie Mystal, who is a regular political commentator and has done some segments about the Democrats' inaction as it pertains to codifying Roe v. Wade for 40 years as it happens. But he's talking specifically about their unwillingness to respond to the Dobbs decision. He says, I'm really not going to stay here all night and deal with all you. But what can Biden do? Biden can do nothing, people. I can't spoon feed everything. Here are some of my writings on the subject since September. Have a blessed weekend. So he shares the articles that he has written on all of the things that Joe Biden could potentially be doing here. Obviously, there are a number of avenues, right? He could encourage his party to codify it through Congress. This court could still theoretically overturn that, depending on how it interpreted the law. But that is one route that they have neglected for 40 years, to even attempt to codify Roe through legislation. Other options include stacking the court, quite frankly. The last time that the Supreme Court expanded, it expanded to 9 because we had grown to 9 circuits, nine circuits of appellate courts, right? Now we have 13. So there's a pretty solid argument to say, let's just expand the court to 13 justices. He could do that. He could put 4 people who I have no doubt would be very friendly to corporations and the business community and banks, but he could put 4 people up that would disagree with the Dobbs decision, and that would at least address this particular issue if it was run through the courts once again. There really are a number of people have even floated that there are a few justices on the court who could be impeached. I don't know if that would be successful. I think that's kind of a dubious argument, to be honest with you, because I don't think the justices necessarily lied at their hearings. I think they dodged the question, and everybody who believed them was naive to. When they say something like, Roe is the law or something to that effect, that doesn't mean they can't rule in a different direction, right? All they're saying is it currently is the law of the land. So there are ways that they framed those questions during their confirmation hearings that I think were more just to dodge the question. And I think anybody who wanted to hear them say, I will not overturn Roe, may have heard them say that. So I don't know how much grounds there would be to impeach the justices on those grounds. Of course, there also may be other grounds with some of these justices, as the media has covered ad nauseum, and rightly so, during their confirmation processes, and some new issues pertaining to Clarence Thomas, who never should have sat on that court to start with, but for Joe Biden and his Senate Judicial Committee that berated Anita Hill for daring to come forward with allegations against Clarence Thomas. He helped put Thomas on that court. Thomas, obviously a right-wing fraud. People like to defend him as an originalist and say, you might disagree with him, but he's principled. No, he's a fucking fraud. And actually, you know what? I'll go ahead and prove that to you all right now. Clarence Thomas, I wish I would have brought this up. I didn't realize I was going to talk about this, but the conversation just kind of went there, the discussion here. So Thomas part of his actual opinion in the Dobbs decision, his written opinion in the Dobbs decision, was that the Supreme Court now needs to reconsider other cases that were found on similar 14th Amendment grounds. He even said, including, and he listed off Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. So I think most people probably know Obergefell, which basically codified the protection of it said states cannot criminalize gay marriage, right? Lawrence said states cannot criminalize sodomy, and Griswold said states cannot criminalize access to contraception, okay? So he brings up these three cases that the Supreme Court ruled, all of them on very similar privacy grounds, right? 14th Amendment grounds. And he says, I think the court needs to reconsider these decisions. So he's attacking women and the LGBTQ community with those statements in his written opinion during the Dobbs decision. He conveniently left one case out, though, that was also very famously, the finding was on those same 14th Amendment privacy grounds, and that is Loving v. Virginia, which protected interracial marriage. Now, why might Clarence Thomas leave that out if he's an originalist and just really believes in his interpretation of the Constitution? Clarence Thomas is a hack. He is a fraud. He is a self-interested, abusive, misogynistic clown who has absolutely no business being anywhere near power. That certainly is not to in any way excuse Gorsuch or ACB or any of the other conservative justices there. Kavanaugh is a clown in his own right? It's just to point out that I think some of the defenses of Clarence Thomas are absurd and ridiculous right on the surface, and even his confirmation process would confirm that to anybody paying the slightest modicum of attention. But anyway, that was just a little bit of a tangent. I think that this court, I think the one tiny, before we get back to the Roe v. Wade thing, I think the one tiny, and I really don't mean to minimize how absolutely terrible this is, the only tiny silver lining that I see in this string of horrendous rulings, right? Teachers can pray in schools, and all of these rulings that they're making, the Miranda rights that they cut into, and all that. The one tiny silver lining there is I think a lot of people are starting to realize what a joke the Supreme Court is. And the Supreme Court as an institution only really has authority because other institutions grant it that authority out of decorum and out of respecting the SEP that the founding fathers put together, right? What I mean by that is the Supreme Court can make a finding or a ruling, and if the executive branch simply chooses not to enforce it, then that ruling really means very little, right? There are still some really absurd laws on the books in various states, you guys, but if the cops choose not to enforce it, is it really a law? Like, there are still some states where, like, sex acts, like there are states where fellatio is illegal, and like all these nonsensical, ridiculous things, right? You can go look up funny laws that states have. If the cops don't enforce it, it's really not a law, right? It's really not a law. So the Supreme Court only has its authority if the executive branch continues to enforce the rulings that the Supreme Court executes. So I think people starting to view the court as the clown show that it is a positive thing. There have been reports from behind the scenes that John Roberts has been concerned for the last handful of years about the way that the general public views the court. And I think it's exactly that. I think he's worried about the slippery slope of people starting to view the court as illegitimate. And again, I don't at all mean to minimize the outrageous, like the extent of the harm that will come from these rulings. This is a terrible, terrible week in terms of the actions that the Supreme Court has taken. I'm pointing out that I hope that the outrageousness of all of this will perhaps wake some people up in terms of how they view the court in general, right? Anyway, back to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. You can see here what Joe Biden's doing. Biden is nominating an anti-abortion lawyer to become a federal judge because, of course, he is. I'm not going to go into this article here, but I'm sure a number of you have seen this. And Biden, that process did happen before this ruling came out. But remember that you guys, this was leaked like a month ago Democrats had like a month head start on this because it was leaked. And his response was to nominate an anti-abortion lawyer to the federal judiciary. Democrats, of course, have been very feckless on this in a number of different ways. They've cut deals with Mitch McConnell over and over again to stack the federal judiciary with conservative judges. It's how politics goes, you guys. Conservatives play hardball, Democrats roll over and hide behind decorum and well, we can't go after the court because what if people started to disrespect the court or not take it seriously? What then? You know, they're just, feckless isn't even a strong enough adjective to describe the fucking Democrats. They literally do the bidding of Republicans while they're fear-mongering about and trying to fundraise off how bad Republicans are. You really honestly could not make this up for like an onion piece. You really couldn't. Also wanted to show this here. This is a tweet from Olivia Pascal. She says, "This is so embarrassing." This is a email from Nancy Pelosi. "I asked you Monday, I asked you Tuesday, I asked you Wednesday, I asked you Thursday. I'm truly sorry to ask you again today." Truly sorry to ask you again today. "But my team just informed me we failed to meet yesterday's first end of quarter deadline since the Supreme Court's ruling. I won't sugarcoat this. If I don't reach 1,387 more gifts before midnight to close the budget gap, it will be the single most devastating setback for Democrats' chances of winning this election and protecting women's reproductive freedoms nationwide. If you've been waiting for a moment to step up with $15, this is it. Can I count on you?" You know what actually might have been the single most devastating setback for Democrats' chances of winning this election? When they did fucking nothing for a year and a half. That might have been the most devastating setback for Democrats' chances of winning the election. I mean, you guys, we've gone over it ad nauseum, right? Folding to the parliamentarian on minimum wage, promising climate action, and then instead granting dozens of new drilling permits, right? I mean, just like on every fucking single issue, he promises to cancel student debt. He has the authority to cancel all of it. He's like, "I'll maybe consider canceling $10,000. I mean, it's inaction on everything. He promised a public option. Have we seen any changes to healthcare in his year and a half? Nothing. Just on issue after issue after issue after issue after issue, right? He says he'll deal with COVID. Instead, he just pretends it's over. You know, I mean, just issue after issue after issue. The dude has done nothing. That might have been where the Democrats lost their chances in November. But instead, Nancy wants you to believe that it's because you aren't giving them enough money after they rolled over to the conservatives to not only allow them to take over the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary, but to also set the stage for the election of Donald Trump, which they are now blaming for all of this. So Democrats, of course, you know, pretend they're completely innocent when they are the wolf guarding the hen house, when they are playing gatekeeper for the fascistic right-wing party that they constantly fearmonger about in order to raise funds and campaign on. It is, again, it's like you really just could not make up the extent of the deceptive, you know, nature of their messaging here following this decision. And you guys, again, I want to point out they had a month notice. This was leaked. What did they spend that month doing? They drafted fundraising emails. Are you fucking kidding me? That's it? That's it? Nothing else. I mean, you know, that really should tell you just about all that you need to know. Here's another example. This from David Sirota. He says, "Feel like they are just trolling everyone at this point." It's Chuck Schumer, of course. Hi, David, with a picture, a smiling picture. "This is Chuck Schumer, and I have some urgent news to share with you. I just reviewed, I presume that means our end of quarter fundraising report." Oh, her, because it's her end of quarter fundraising report, and I'm shocked at how far behind Catherine Cortez Masto is on her goal. I need you to understand, if Catherine loses, Democrats lose the Senate. Our last line of defense from Mitch McConnell's national abortion plan. We're going to do nothing for 40 years, and we're presently in power going to continue to do nothing, but we want your money. And we're going to frame this in a way that makes it sound like it's your fault if Democrats lose or don't meet their arbitrary funding deadlines, right? Or, funding targets. So just utterly fucking ridiculous here. And, you know, I'm sure a number of you have been keeping up on this, but it's just really utterly ridiculous. I tweeted this out earlier, but when Andrew Jackson was upset with the not exactly a sympathetic figure, right? One of the worst presidents of all time, Trail of Tears, all that. And actually this ruling had something to do with that. When he was essentially told by the Supreme Court, you cannot continue to impede further on Cherokee lands. You know what Andrew Jackson said? This is what conservatives do. They actually fight. Andrew Jackson said that, effectively, I'm paraphrasing, the court has made its finding. Now let's see it enforce it. Again, that concept I was talking about earlier. If other institutions aren't enforcing the rulings of the Supreme Court, they don't really fucking matter, do they? So Jackson basically said, you can go fucking pound sand. I'm going to do what I want. And he went on and most know the story from there, right? Massacred a whole bunch of indigenous communities. So when conservatives want to do something awful like that, they disregard the Supreme Court, right? When George Bush wants to pass his tax cuts, he fires the parliamentarian and replaces him with someone who will agree with his interpretation of Senate rules. You know, what do Democrats do? They cower, and then they hide behind decorum. And they think that that's going to play with their voters. Of course it's not. Of course, far more importantly, what it means is that the Supreme Court can inflict violence upon, you know, women and the LGBTQ community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because Democrats, who are supposed to be the party that is somewhat of a line of defense for the most vulnerable and marginalized people in our society, instead cower and fold and grovel to the Republican Party and say, Mitch, can we cut you a deal? I'll put another anti-abortion judge on the federal judiciary for you. Can we please make a deal? Even though we're in power, can I grovel to you and can we make a deal? It is so fucking pathetic. I keep saying feckless. Again, it's just not a strong enough adjective. These Democrats are not your friend. They are the gatekeeper for the fascists. They are more upset with leftists than they are with Republicans and fascists. They have demonstrated this time and again. And in fact, the next story we're going to get to here is a nice little slice of that, right?